have Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives. She hosts Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and the Real Leaders with Roshini podcast, which can be found on your favorite podcast app. She is a licensed attorney and former TV reporter, also author of the book Communicate That, which is in its 3rd edition, and her website is ownyourwow.com. Roshini Rajkumar, good friend of the show, welcome back.
Thanks, Jimmy. Happy Monday to you. It's hard to believe it's the middle of May, and at least in Minnesota, we've been under a stay-at-home order for 2 months, which was just lifted by the governor, and some businesses are starting to go back.
So what is the dynamic like in Minnesota as far as what's permitted right now, Roshini?
So for restaurants, pretty much takeout curbside is the main thing. Some restaurants do hope to open by June 1st. Hair salons can't open until about June 1st, although the Mall of America and some other malls have opened today. So I don't know, I haven't been in any of them yet, so I don't know if all retailers have opened, but this is going to be an interesting experiment because retail especially will be such a good judge on people's comfort levels with getting back out there.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I will say that I got my hair cut early last week. I think a week ago today I got my hair cut, and it was a good process. How they did it, I told this story last week where you go in there, and I went to Sport Clips, and that's where I've been going. And so when I got my hair cut, they had a mask on. I had a mask on. The woman who was doing my hair was talking to me about how comfortable she felt at the way her employer was handling this as far as making sure that they have everything clean, that they have systems and processes in place. Also, there's a nice thing that Sport Clips does where when you get your hair washed, you also have this steam towel that can go on your face. And so
Nice.
that was the brief moment when you can take off your mask is when you have the steam towel put on. They still do that, and then they take it off, and then you put your mask right back on, and then you're back out to finish up and get going. And I felt comfortable, especially because the people working there felt relieved to be back to work, and they felt comfortable with everything that was going on, how they were structuring it. I think it can be done sooner than June 1st in Minnesota.
Right. And I know, I mean, my hairstylist and I have been in touch. We text, because at one time they thought they were going to be able to go back today, but that was then extended out. So they are ready to go. They're so ready to see people. And it's interesting because some of the small businesses have actually opened. Several of them actually sued our governor for the right to reopen over the last few weeks. So I don't know if that went into the lifting of the stay-at-home and the allowing of several businesses to go back. But, here's the thing, and I don't know if you're finding this in Colorado, but in Minnesota even and in other states, as you see the reports, it seems pretty inconsistent. The size of the business, the type of business, that's where I think it gets a little difficult to pass that straight face argument when it comes to reopening.
So, Roshini, one of the things that we see is, of course, a big debate about reopening. There are some who say you just shouldn't do anything right now. We need to give it a lot more time, and then you can start the reopening process. So some states are very strict. Others are much more lenient, but then there are still some who are sort of somewhere in between. And then in terms of the debate, I mean, you've got the Trump administration saying some things, some of their health officials differing from what the president and his senior people in the White House are saying. And then you've got governors who have different views. The big question is, how do you message in this era of reopening, especially when people are so distrustful of government and media?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really challenging. And they're also not only getting information from their specific leaders, right? They're getting information from so many different sources. So a lot of things get muddled, some things get miscommunicated. And let's face it, some things are just plain inaccurate. And that is what I hope people can discern. People can really ask questions about the information they're taking in. If it doesn't seem to make sense, what some particular article or a particular source is saying, I would hope that people would question that, look into it, and not just take it at face value. And that also includes sometimes things that are coming from official channels, because not all of the scientists are agreeing with one another. And I know you've gotten into that on your show in the past. So it's really about common sense. And also in our country, choice and freedom of expression and freedom to move around are some privacy, are issues and fundamental privileges that we have. We, in fact, call them rights. So that's another thing that has to get weighed in here. And certainly, if someone feels uncomfortable about going out of their home, I'm not going to want anyone to force them. But as different orders get lifted, I don't also think anyone should judge people if they do choose to go out and get back into society in a safe way.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I'm a big believer that we're at a point now where people can make the choice, and I think most people will be responsible. In fact, one of the interesting dynamics that we've already seen here in Colorado, I think there are so many people who are so frustrated with the very stern way in which so many government officials have been handling this, pulling business licenses from certain individuals and whatnot, that now they're feeling like they need to express themselves through civil disobedience in order to get attention. And so they're not caring about wearing masks or any of the social distancing guidelines necessarily. And not just because they don't care about that issue or because they don't care about their health and not spreading this, but because they're trying to send a message and they're so frustrated. And so if they're going to go, if they feel the need to go out to a restaurant or a cafe and to just fill that place up like this one in Castle Rock that now had its business license, Castle Rock, Colorado, that now had its business license stripped away, they're going to go ahead and do that because they feel like there's no other way for them to make a statement that the government will hear. Although then you have some politicians that will say, well, this just means we have to crack the whip even harder, which is kind of the Gretchen Whitmer way of doing things in Michigan.
Well, and that's the thing. You've got both ends of the spectrum on this. So in our neighboring state, Wisconsin, you probably saw some visuals on national media over the weekend. The bars and restaurants were all open there, and Wisconsinites were all too happy to get back at it. And in fact, people from other states drove into Wisconsin, including Minnesota, to experience getting back to restaurants. So we will see what that means. But I also think it's a good test of, have we done the right thing so far? You know, checking who are really the most vulnerable. We have a visual on who has the biggest risk factors, which sets of people are the most vulnerable. And I would hope that those people don't go out and their families help to keep them healthy. But if you're not in one of those groups, then we have to revert to the Constitution, which actually should always be present. It should always be present. I hate to even say revert to it, but we have to think about that. And we've talked many times, Jimmy, I am nonpartisan. So I am really looking at this from the letter of the Constitution within reason, over the hundreds of years that we've interpreted that as different communities and under different leadership, and case law has played into it. I just think we find a lot that's right in our Constitution when it comes to some of those fundamentals of free movement, of privacy, and other rights of expression.
So I have a new column up. I'm a columnist at a local outlet, Colorado Politics, and I focus on Governor Polis. And while I think he's doing better than a lot of Democrats across the country, and of course I'm not a nonpartisan person like you are, Roshini, but I look at this and I say, okay, he's better than a lot of the Democrats around the country who are governors. But there are a heck of a lot of areas where he's basically King Jared Polis. And he's been operating unilaterally, suspending election laws this week, for example, or on Friday, to begin allowing ballot signatures to be submitted for the initiative process via email and mail, which there's no legal authorization for the governor to do that, but emergency powers. Well, I end this by saying that legislators ought to, or that the people of Colorado, quote, ought to remind us that legislators need to make or change laws. Emergency powers do not suspend state and federal constitutions and nullify laws, which goes exactly to your point, Roshini. And so I'm curious, and then we'll shift gears from this topic. I'm curious your thoughts on how these governors should be presenting their decisions and explaining them, whether it is on the reopening side or on a more restrictive side, in order to maintain or win back the trust of citizens who are very skeptical of what they're doing and how they're going about it.
Well, first, I want to compliment you on how you worded that at the end of your column, because that's exactly right. I agree with what you're saying. It is a slippery slope. And it is very smart for governors to remind all of us that they recognize they are only one branch of the government. They are part of one branch in our government, and they are not disrespecting the other branches. So if they're going to do something that they can pretty much predict will get called out for overreach, they need to remind all of us and their constituencies that they are following and are having respect for the three different branches of government. But at this time, it's the XYZ. Here is why I need to do this. They really have to spell it out for us. But then it is also incumbent upon the different states' legislatures to call out the governors when the governor's reasoning doesn't seem to make sense. So it's that combination.
Yeah.
The legislature cannot stop being vigilant.
And Roshini,
but it is absolutely their role to make laws and not the governors.
Well, actually, the last paragraph of my column for Colorado Politics says, King Polis should be dethroned and demoted back to governor. Let the General Assembly, which is Colorado's legislature, begin the revolution when it returns next week.
Very well stated. I mean, your point. Again, there are certain things that I think we can all agree are emergencies. And I just don't know if we are at that same heightened level. In fact, I don't really think we are at that same heightened level that we were in March and early April when we didn't know as much as we know now. So learnings have changed, even though there's no vaccine yet for the coronavirus, for COVID-19. We do have more information and we do have more protection against it. So that should then warrant us to change our behavior.
So let's shift gears here. Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, strategic communication and crisis coach. You've seen it. Last Thursday, we had some fun here on Jimmy at the Crossroads when none other than billionaire investor, Shark Tank co-host, and Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban joined the program. And I want to play a snippet on it from that interview and then get your reaction, because there was a point about halfway in, a little less than halfway in, where I started pressing him on some of his ideas. And at one point, sparks flew just a little bit. I just don't have that kind of trust and faith in the federal government to do those sorts of programs.
We gotta let dogma go.
But it's not just about dogma; it's about practicality, and we've seen countries across the globe. Yeah,
so Jimmy, you're an entrepreneur.
I'll give you the alternative.
You're an entrepreneur. Sure. You've got to create 30 million jobs over 3 years.
Yeah.
Tell me what companies can do that.
So first
tell me
of
what
all,
20 or 50 or 100 companies can do that.
I can't tell you a specific companies that can do that because I don't know. In fact,
or investors.
But
what I don't, the greatest investors of
right.
all time.
Well, but I don't presume to think that I know who's going to be the best investor, the best company to do that. Just as I don't think the government is that I can presume that the government's going to be effective to do it. I think if you start reopening, which isn't going to be an instant process, because you do have, of course, you have a situation with reopening where not everybody's going to go to restaurants, not everybody's going to go to movie theaters and so forth. But if you begin that process and allow people to start their businesses back up and continue to provide some of the assistance that we've been doing, I think that could be much more effective, especially with a deregulatory regime, than having the government do what hasn't worked in the past, in my view.
I wish you were right, Jimmy. I really, really wish you were right. And prior to January of 2020, I would have agreed with you 100 out of 100 times. But this is not what we're facing today.
And now, over the weekend, a tweet came out from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez retweeting with comment Mark Cuban, putting forward not just the idea of a jobs program, but now adding on to it that in the interim, he thinks every American household should get $1,000, or at least most American households should get $1,000 every 2 weeks. And she retweeted that with comment, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and said she supports it. So that's interesting. Anyway, what'd you make of that interview?
Well, and I saw your complete Cuban interview, and I do think it was great. You were obviously, as always, very ready for him, ready for the discussion. You were right to point out that if we can just look at some of the businesses that have closed, those are millions of jobs. I mean, what are we at? 36 million and counting have filed for unemployment so far. You can't tell me that many of those businesses aren't able to get it together and go back and bring employees back. So I think you're going to account for several of the millions of unemployed right there. I think his heart's in the right place, but I don't know if creating a whole new system that's bankrolled by just continuing to print money that we don't have is necessarily the right way to go. So I think there's some sort of combination of maybe what he's advising, if there are some areas that the government could open up and create some jobs. I just don't know that it's 30 million jobs created by the government. I just don't see that happening. And as far as weekly checks, I get very nervous about just printing money on end and not trying to balance the books. I mean, some businesses maybe need to fail in order to regroup and move on and get into whatever the new economy is going to be. Look, I'm a small business owner. I've had to pivot. There will be certain programs I can never do again because of the way our world is now. I can't just toss up my hands and, cry, woe is me. I have to figure out different ways to create processes, programs, and services that are interesting to my clients and maybe even better on many levels for clients.
That's a great point. Now, I want you to put your strategic communication coach hat on. You have coached many C-suite executives and others on how to present on television and in interviews. And you've also been a TV reporter, and of course, you are a podcast and radio host, as I am. So I'm curious your thoughts on how I approached the interview and how Mark Cuban handled the interview as the interviewee.
I think you were both great on that front. I don't have any real visual as far as in each of your own delivery. I might have had him reshape the background. I mean, he had a door open in the background, and at first I was a little distracted by someone behind that door. I could see movement back there. So I might have had him just reframe his shot and maybe been a little less casually dressed. But you know what? You part of the beauty of that conversation, Jimmy, is that you got Mark Cuban. That's a big get. And you got him in the comfort of his home office. And he was feeling pretty chilled out. And he had, good branding there, the Mavericks t-shirt on. And you guys had a great discussion. It was very enjoyable to watch, both as someone who's known you as a host and has become a friend of mine over the years. But also, I do admire Mark Cuban. I think he's a great businessman. And it was really personally enjoyable for me to watch the two of you in that discussion. And I think we can all gain some really good points from it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I very much agree. I mean, the approach I wanted to take was he hasn't gotten any pushback on his ideas. And I vehemently disagree with his position. And I know for a fact that he had fun doing that. After the interview, he told me as much. So it is always encouraging when you have a good conversation. Viewer reaction was just fantastic. I replayed it on my radio show on Saturday, but I also appreciated how he was quick. He was really fast, and some of his debating techniques were just very much on point, which I appreciated as well. So that was a fun interview to do.
Yeah, and it's a good lesson, I think, in general for all of us. Sometimes you do have to remember that you don't have 10, 15, 20 minutes. So it's a good process to figure out, how do I communicate what I want to say in 1 or 2 minutes if questions are flying at me. Right. And so it's a really good, I think, would be a good case study for anyone, young people in your world who, I know are very important to you, as a good example of just being quick on your feet.
Roshini Rajkumar, again, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Let's talk about one other topic. So on Saturday night, they had a big #GraduateTogether event that was broadcast on television and online. A number of different speakers, some really clever things. I didn't watch it except for President Obama's speech. I didn't watch what went on, but I saw video while I was broadcasting my radio show live. I saw what was going on TV, so it was pretty clever what they had going on. But here I want to play Cut 5, which is former President Obama beginning a commencement speech about 7-8 minutes long that was part of Graduate Together. And this is a snippet from the beginning, and I think the way in which he started things off was pretty good. Let's take a look.
And as much as I'm sure you love your parents, I'll bet that being stuck at home with them and playing board games or watching Tiger King on TV is not exactly how you envisioned the last few months of your senior year. Now, I'll be honest with you. The disappointments of missing a live graduation, those will pass pretty quick. I don't remember much of my own high school graduation. I know that not having to sit there and listen to a commencement speaker isn't all that bad. Mine usually go on way too long. Also, not that many people look great in those caps, especially if you have big ears like me. And you'll have plenty of time to catch up with your friends once the immediate public health crisis is over. But what remains true is that your graduation marks your passage into adulthood, the time when you begin to take charge of your own life. It's when you get to decide what's important to you, the kind of career you want to pursue, who you want to build a family with, the values you want to live by.
That message, Roshini, I thought was a very good one. And he added humor. He added some things that were going on contemporaneously, like Tiger King, for example, that people, especially young guys and gals that are graduating from high school, which is the target audience for this, could relate to. What'd you make of that opening portion from the former president?
You know, I think the humor was good. I think that he was trying to be relatable and catch a little smile. Frankly, I was a little underwhelmed, though. I just thought he could have been a little more inspirational off the top. And maybe that's what he thinks he was getting to as he went along. But I think we could have narrowed this. I think it was about 7 minutes 30. And I don't even know that that speech had to be that long. I would have tried to script for him a 5 to 6 minute speech. He is usually a very, very good orator. And I expected a little more from this, frankly. So that's my professional take as both a coach and a keynote speaker.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I have a low opinion of the president. I was trying to give him, the former president, thank goodness, I was trying to give him a little bit of credit there. But this is the part that I didn't like. So in cut 6, President Obama starts to allude at President Trump and other political leaders who maybe these young people shouldn't be trusting.
It's also pulled the curtain back on another hard truth, something that we all have to eventually accept once our childhood comes to an end. You know, all those adults that you used to think were in charge and knew what they were doing, turns out they don't have all the answers. A lot of them aren't even asking the right questions. So if the world's going to get better, it's going to be up to you. That realization may be kind of intimidating, but I hope it's also inspiring. With all the challenges this country faces right now, nobody can tell you, no, you're too young to understand, or this is how it's always been done. Because with so much uncertainty, with everything suddenly up for grabs, this is your generation's world to shape. Since I'm one of the old guys, I won't tell you what to do with this power that rests in your hands, but I'll leave you with 3 quick pieces of advice.
I'll give you advice, but I'm one of the old guys, so you might as well just discount it, sort of what Obama was saying there. Look, here's what I didn't like about it. It wasn't so much that it was getting political and dropping hints that President Trump in particular has been irresponsible or whatever point he was trying to get across. But look, I'm someone who got involved in politics at the ripe old age of 13. I was going to political breakfast groups with people 4, 5, 6 times my age at that time, and I've grown up in politics. While I think that we shouldn't discount the role of young people, I mean, you know full well, I'm a big advocate for getting millennials and now Generation Z more involved in politics, and especially in the conservative movement, and we need to empower young people to speak up. I also think it is absolutely critical that we recognize and respect the wisdom that can and does come from our elders. And I think that the former president spent too much time, and I think any bit of time was too much, in not just saying, you can take this and run with it and make a difference too, speak up and share your views and stand up for what you think is right. But he also said, look, these adults, many of them, they don't really know what's up, so do your own thing and kind of discount what they're doing. And I thought that wasn't a very good message to send to young people.
Well, overall, it's really like this speech was 2 speeches. It was a speech that was trying to be inspirational, and then it was a little mini speech in there being critical. And I think he should have picked one or the other. And then overall, it would have been a stronger speech in general. I would have loved to see him give the Obama-esque, you know, what he's known for, his signature, kind of that high energy, passion-induced speech. Yeah. That is what really the 2020 grads need and deserve right now. I mean, unprecedented. I don't like to use that word because it's overused, but an unprecedented set of challenges these graduates are facing. And yet they're rising above the malaise and the real confusion and distortion of their final months of their senior years of whichever schooling they're in. So I really wanted to see more of a powerful and passionate, inspirational speech. And instead, we got kind of two speeches mashed together into one that I don't know was quite as resonant as I would have expected. Because let's face it, there are certain people who speak, Jimmy, when they get up, you hear they're about to speak, you're just assuming they're going to be a 10, right? And Obama is one of those, regardless of your politics. I think most people would agree with that. And this was a letdown for me. I did not watch it live myself. I had other things going on Saturday night. I was really glad that ceremony was happening. I caught some of the musical acts going on. I mean, they were really doing some things to try to honor these students, and I applaud the effort. But I did watch it its entirety on tape. And I was disappointed in what it could have been.
It's interesting because you went at it from a few different angles, as I would expect, Roshini Rajkumar, and the two biggest things that I gather are, one, it was two speeches in one, so that hurt the message, so it wasn't as strong for these young people. And I think he should have chosen the first one.
Then get watered down. I mean, if you're going to attack current leadership, go on and attack.
Which I don't think you should do in a nationwide commencement address like that as the former president. He's doing too much attacking of the current president, in my view, anyway. But that's the one. And then on the other end, it's also the delivery. But one of the challenges, I think, for his delivery, and final thought here, is that when you're not speaking in front of an audience, as he's used to doing when he gives those powerhouse speeches, and you're just on camera like that, it is a little hard to fully bring it. But at the same time, I now do a show on camera every day of the week, and sometimes I do monologues where I get very impassioned. It can absolutely be done.
Yeah, and that is the challenge, to fully bring it. But he wasn't born yesterday. He is who he is, and he has the ability to bring it. And he didn't in that speech. And, that's not going to ruin graduation for these millions of students. But that's just my take as someone who is very particular when I'm prepping people for speeches like that, as well as debriefing with them. Because the whole intent of a speech like that is to inspire. That is the intent. And it's unfortunate for the graduates, and surprising, actually, coming from the former president, that he didn't hit a 10 with this one.
Yeah, no, that's true. Remember, he's the guy in 2004 at the Democratic National Convention who wowed the crowd, and that led him to becoming president of the United States in the 2008 election. Roshini Rajkumar, check out our website, ownyourwow.com. Always great to check in with you, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jimmy. And a really quick note, anyone who wants some inspiration, go back to the 1984 Democratic Convention. I was very young. I was very inspired by the then governor. I don't even know if he was governor at the time, but Mario Cuomo. It was an absolutely stellar speech, and anyone can learn. It's a masterclass in a keynote speech.
So I haven't actually watched that. I know my mother doesn't like Mario Cuomo, and the reason she doesn't is because every time she became of drinking age, he moved the drinking age up. So, I mean, little things like that will stick with you the rest of your life.
Very personal for her.
Exactly, because she lived in upstate New York. So, all right, Roshini, thank you so much. Roshini Rajkumar, everybody, once again joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. So great to get her opinion, as always, on a variety of topics, especially that presentation of Obama and the stylistic aspects, and same thing with my interview with Mark Cuban. Thanks for watching this clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. You do not want to miss a minute of engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel, and you'll be sure to catch our live broadcast. I appreciate your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.